Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for 11/8/2018. This week kind of got messed up by the election, which thank God was generally okay for the Democrats. And with them retaking the House, at least there's now a semblance of a check on Trump. We'll see how it goes. It's probably entering the most dangerous phase of his presidency. Anyway, since I don't want to think about that and a whole bunch of other stuff, we're up to the 1960 Best Picture winner, The Apartment. It's the other film by Billy Wilder. He's the guy who did Lost Weekend. This film is more in line with the rest of his filmography because it's a dramedy, and it's this story of a young accounting guy in an insurance company who has a bachelor pad that he lends out to other executives for them to have affairs at, so they don't get caught by their wives. And then Shirley MacLaine plays a elevator operator named Fran, Miss Kubrick, who's having an affair with C.C. Baxter. Bud is the character's name. So Fran, it's built around something like a love triangle as well, where it's Seldrake is the boss who's having an affair with Fran, who is who's played by Shirley MacLaine, who is the romantic interest of Baxter, who's played by Jack Lemmon. And there, Sheldrake is using Baxter's bachelor pad to have the affair at, and so that's how he's been greasing the wheels. It's actually a really clever use of a love triangle, because at the end of the movie, in spoilers, Kubrick and Baxter end up getting together because they both reject Seldrake, which is not usually how it works. Usually what happens in a love triangle is the woman makes a decision for one of the two men, and so she rejects one and chooses the other. Whereas this one, it's sort of in flip, where they end up both choosing each other because they reject, which is a little bit different. It's actually a very handsome film too. It was it has a lot of striking visuals. The actual apartment is actually a nice little bachelor pad. It also has a great and the office spaces are great sort of cubicle farms, like 1960s. Anyway, the other thing about this movie is I think it has aged very, very well. It actually feels much more like a movie that was made today about the 60s, because it sort of has an implicit critique of sexism and the boys club and everything like that. So let me bring up the trailer and some clips and stuff. See you in a sec. Okay, so one of the things that's really good about this film is Billy Wilder sometimes could be too cynical or too acidic. And Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine performances are very, very tender and have a lot of pathos and character to them. And so they sort of balance sort of the vicious social satire with basically every single guy in the executives being a good old boy who's harassing women. There's actually several overt moments of workplace harassment in this film, etc. And then the Fred McMurray character is an absolute asshole. And so in some ways, sometimes Billy Wilder could be a bit much. But Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine, with sort of their tenderness and poignancy, counterbalance it. So the movie ends up having sort of an implicit viciousness, satire to it, but on the surface, it's a very pleasant, entertaining, kind of lighter film. So the movie ends up feeling very, very melancholy, and very, very real in some ways. And I really like how this movie really does a well job of talking about it, workplace issues about all the sexes in such a way that it basically kicks boys clubs in the pants, and it's the entire story, sort of the character art for Baxter is to become a mensch, which is to be a human being. Okay, so this scene right here is sort of the first flirtation scene between Fran and Baxter, or Kubrick. And I really like it. One of the things I do like about this, and this is related to me for atheism, is it's set in an elevator, so it kind of has a male entitlement sense to it. And I'm sure some of her stories, which she references here, are very, very creepy in that way. And I really like sort of the staging of this scene, and I like that joke about the blood rushes to their head, because which head is she referring to there? Anyway, and I really like their easy chemistry, and so that, because the movie ultimately is sort of a love story, that's probably the only scene I wanted to show of them, so you at least get a flavor of the relationship. And Shirley MacLaine gives a very nice multi-layered performance. Now the next bit of scene I want to show you is actually one of the most critical scenes in the movie, because Sheldrick is a guy who like a head of personnel, and there's him right there, and now he is having an affair with Kubrick, and so he's gonna seem like a good guy here about investigating why is this apartment key seeming to be passed around between these 4 other executives, and they all have such glowing reviews of you, and it's actually completely an act. And it's because what he does is he wants to get to the bottom of the key, because he himself wants to use the apartment. And he's going to give Baxter a promotion, because at the end of the scene, he's going to let Sheldrick use his apartment. And then I really like how Lemon here is playing, because the character is a little bit sick. He's under the weather because he was just forced to sleep outside because one of the other executives picked up a woman from a bar. And I like the staging of this scene. There's something menacing about it. The way in which Sheldrick is hovering behind him, everything like that. And I also like how it's situated in Sheldon's office, because then that's sort of like the end goal. And the thing is, and this is sort of a writing technique, is initiating event, which is the sort of the event that kickstarts the story. And this is it for this story, because the story is centered on this love triangle, because both of them end up loving the same woman. Well, wanting the same woman. Is the initiating event is going to be him turning over his apartment key. And there's this thing in writing where you're supposed to have the initiating event, the event that kickstarts the story, reflect in the climax in some ways. And so that's important for the next scene I want to talk about. I also get to say this. The other thing about this movie, when it kicking the boys club in the pants, is like there's something very correct about it being an insurance company, because this is scandalous, especially in the 60s, of having a bachelor pad and basically a place to where, and in this case 5 men are having an affair. But there's something dull and very white collar about it being an insurance company and everything like that. I also like how this movie has a layered gag. So you have sort of the social satire, but then you also have sort of like the gag of him squeezing the nose drip medicine, which is something of like a slapstick thing. And it's just a clever piece of writing. I gotta say this, Fred Murray also makes a good heavy he's a very hypocritical and proud of it character. He because of again he's the head of personnel and he knows what he's doing is probably against formal policy. He's going to hide behind on giving him Music Man tickets, which is a very interesting. I gotta stop using that word. It's a very pointed way of making him seem like hypocrisy, being hypocritical, or everything like that. The other thing you got to realize is that the through the machinations of the plot, Baxter really helps this guy out because he drives Fran to have a suicide attempt, and she would have died if it wasn't for Baxter coming home at the right time. And that's one of the reasons why he ends up being promoted to not only an executive, but this guy's personal assistant, and he's going to end up in an office next door to set up the next sort of clip. And again, it's important that he's going to be handing this key over, and everything like that, because it's going to reflect into the climax of the story. So there's that. Now, the other thing about this movie is it's very visually undistinctive. He actually won art direction. And I'm sure you saw some of the like cubicle bangs, but this office, like it's just sort of a handsome film, and it's surprising that it's so visually engaging because it really is just a couple of locations. I mean, it's basically this office, the apartment, the actual apartment, and then like the cubicle bank, and then a couple of bars. But in some ways, it just feels very, very 60s, very, very boys club. There's something like this office reeks of privilege and dominance and everything like that. Okay, so this sequence right here, is so it's a love triangle, and he sort of love long because Fran at this point is with Seldrick in his own apartment, and so he's just at a bar, and it's Christmas Eve, and he's getting drunk, and this movie. So this is my favorite scene in the entire movie. I love this actress, how she plays this, because she wants to go home with him because she's so, hard up, and I like that there's this, like it's a good way of contrasting. Because in The Office, men are being super aggressive in trying to hook up, but in the actual social setting, in the context of the movie, it's actually a woman who does it, which is a really good way to make the point that she's behaving appropriately and he is not. I also got to say this: the other reason why I'm showing this is this bit about what do you feel about Castro? The Cuban guy. It's just absolutely hysterical to me, and it's easily my favorite scene in any of the movies in the apartment. And it's also important in terms of the plot because they're going to end up hooking up here. And they have something of a wonderful time, but which is the reason why he ends up going home at the soon enough to make sure that Fran Kubelik doesn't end up killing herself by taking some sleeping pills. And it's one of the things I do like a lot about this movie is also Fran is she's not really punished for sexual independence. It's because one, she doesn't die. Two, all the blame goes on to Seldrick and everything for being such an asshole. Okay, so this is the other scene. So this is sort of the climax. And then at this point, Seldrick has moved out. He's divorcing his wife allegedly, and he's going to ask for the key to the apartment so we can take Seldrick, Kubrick, Fran to the apartment, and he's going to turn, and Baxter's going to say no, and he's going to hand him a key. Now, in the context of the movie, it's actually set up way back in the as a sort of an offhanded gag about him getting the wrong key. that the executive key and the keys to his apartment just happen to look the same. So he's actually going to hand him over not the apartment key, but the executive key. And so so there's that really bit of clever writing, but because it's exactly the same thing as the initiating event and him handing off a key, but it becomes significant because it's a different key, and so you have the change across time. The other sort of thing is, I'm sure I said this in the intro, but the climax of the love triangle is resolved not because of the woman, not because of Fran picking Baxter, but because Fran picks being a mensch, and Baxter picks being a mensch, or a good human being. And there's something very, very poignant here about Baxter deciding to not be a member of the boys' club, and you already get the sense that he quit when he put the pencils back. And it's just a clever piece of writing to have the initiating event handing over a key, but the climax being a different key. And it's really, these two scenes really form the social critique, because Baxter wasn't being a mensch because he was using infidelity indirectly, hurting women to get ahead in the corporate world, and now he is a mensch because he's no longer willing to do that. Anyway, so that's going to be it for Comes in Culture. I'm feeling a little bit sick, so I feel like this one was a little bit bad, but see you guys tomorrow.